speaking with James Williams, covering UCLA football with the Southern Cal News Group. And James and I have spoken once in the past, and so I started following him on Twitter, and it's a really good Twitter follow as well. I don't say that to a lot. I just say, oh, it's a fun follow and just your pleasantries. James, before we get started, though, when I finally get shut up, if you don't mind sharing your Twitter handle for everybody so that they can have it. But let's start with the defense, because when last week I think you made a video or a comment or something saying the thing to look out for was Chip Kelly's improvement was on his defense. So I kept my ear to the ground on that, and I think either Hawaii was just nowhere near matched, or you hit the nail on the head about how much improved UCLA. So with that, James, thank you for joining us, and if you don't mind just sharing your thoughts on UCLA's defense.
Yeah, no, sounds good. First of all, feel free to follow me on any social platform at JHW Reporter. But yeah, going back to your question, so defense is totally improved, especially from 2019 to 2020. We saw a lot of improvement during that 2020 season. A lot of that did carry over, but one thing I would say is not to, disregard completely how improved the defense is. It was kind of Hawaii at the end of the day. So I don't know, when there was a lot of players that got in, a lot of the depth where it was able to play, get experience, which may be to some benefit in the future. But there's a lot of seniors on this team, first and foremost. I think, if anything, all 11 are seniors. If not, it gets kind of complicated, obviously, because of the pandemic year, but you have a lot of third, fourth year guys within the program. Of course, you got some transfers, some from Alabama, some from Notre Dame that had an impact in this game, especially on special teams. But just going to the defense a little bit, like you said, definitely signs of improvement. It's kind of crazy because it was almost kind of hard to write about the defense on game day, let alone, we'll talk about the offense in a minute, I'm sure. But when your highest tacklers only had 5 tackles, it's kind of like they were just, when you watch the game, they're all over the place. They're making plays. They're attempting to turn the ball over. One guy had Mitchell Gude had 2 forced fumbles. Those weren't recovered though. But again, they're batting down passes, and you're like, okay, who's the one guy batting down the passes? Who's the one guy causing the fumbles? And it just wasn't one guy. It was just everybody. So it's kind of like trying to say who led this defense in any way against Hawaii is kind of hard to say. But definitely signs of improvement, things to be excited about. One of the things Coach Norwood, who is the assistant head coach and defensive backs coach, said was a lot of what happened with the pandemic. Excuse me, Echo, can you turn off the alarm, please? I'm sorry, my echo's going off. But the secondary was definitely, took some steps forward, I think, because one of the things Norwood said, as I was saying, was they were trying to put in a new scheme. They were trying to, put Norwood stuff in along with Jerry Azzanero's stuff, and it just wasn't working during a pandemic year. You're not seeing guys in person. You weren't able to see face to face, and really kind of do what you needed to do. But now that they are seeing each other face to face, now that they are able to get in the same room, I think you're seeing a lot of that show. Again, they have a game against LSU that's going to be a lot different in terms of the talent scale. So the defense is much improved for sure. Let's not mistake that for what we did see, at least from the stat sheet this past Saturday.
So let's transition to offense. Even if you take the block punt out, they still scored 37 points. So 44 minus 7, 37, if my math skills are correct. Looking at the very first pass of the game forward, DTR to me looked like he just looked like the nervous system, and the nervousness was in his system. And then Zach Charbonnet was the surprise of the night, but I was so happy for him. If you don't mind elaborating on where you think they were against Hawaii and to where you think they're going to be this weekend as far as the offense.
Yeah, let's start with DTR first. From what I've kind of picked up on with him, especially in the opening games, is and it kind of goes with a lot of players, right? It's just those first game jitters, not knowing what to expect, and just getting it out of the way. And I think obviously starting your season against a team like Hawaii rather than LSU, you were able to get away with a win and get some of those jitters and mistakes out of the way. DTR did have some guys that were wide open and some plays that he could have made, and they just weren't made. I've been listening to national radio and national TV, and a lot of them are saying that, the 10 days had an impact on him that he missed during this last month. I don't think so. It did fall in line with the COVID timeline. I'm not saying he had COVID. We don't know. He just said it was personal reasons, but he was still part of the Zoom meetings and everything else. So he was still very involved with the game planning and the preparation throughout the camp. But I think the thing with him is he's just always been a little bit of a slow starter during that first game of the season. And again, I think we all are. I think he had like 3 or 4 turnovers in the season opener against Hawaii, against Colorado last year, and may have had a couple turnovers 2 years ago. With that said, he take it for what it is, the positive out of it, and something I'm sure is taking as a positive is there were no turnovers from Dorian Thompson-Robinson, at least that I can remember off the top of my head. And if you're UCLA on offense in the passing game, you'll take that any day. You can say Zach Charbonnet was a surprise. Many outside of those who, like me, I'm watching UCLA every day, wasn't a total surprise because was a bruiser, and we've seen a lot of that during camp. The same with Brenton Brown too. Obviously, Charbonnet is the one kind of running in front of those headlines today or this past week. But when you get 3 touchdowns, 106 yards, and only doing it on 6 carries says a lot about what your backfield can do, right? And again, if you're Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the quarterback, and you're having jitters and the passing game isn't as effective, it doesn't hurt to have a solid backfield with Brenton Brown and Zach Charbonnet behind you. But for Dorian Thompson-Robinson, obviously LSU is going to be totally aware of the run game, and the pressure is going to be on to get the passing game going. They came out of halftime with the lead, and I was kind of in the press box saying there's no way they're putting Dorian Thompson-Robinson and some of these starters back out there in the second half, and they did. They put an effort in that first drive coming out of the second half. They did start with the ball to get the ball moving through with the passing game, and they did that. They got the touchdown to Kaz Allen, who's a versatile player for them. Will kind of be looking to fill in that role Demetric Felton had for them last year. So, yeah, I think it was a good thing. And once he got the jitters out of the way and getting that first drive going, kind of shake some of that off a little bit. I think they'll be good to go. And he kind of talked about it a little bit that there was just jitters there. He was trying to throw the ball and make plays, but there's no need to try and force and make big plays when you have big boys behind you. And they also have big guys up front when you look at that offensive line. Funny moment yesterday during the press conference on Monday, one of the reporters asked about how dominant that offensive line and the holes and the gaps being so big that some of us reporters were able to run through some of those holes if we were given the opportunity. Chip Kelly kind of sized each one of us up, and I don't think he was that confident. Maybe that was just with our ability and what size we brought to the media scrum. But he didn't discount his guys up front and is very happy with those guys. Obviously, the offensive line is the strength of the team this year on offense. All those guys are veteran guys and have experience. And he even made an audible with one of his starters, I think, at right guard, putting Mafi in instead of Clemens. Clemens was first on the depth chart, but decided to go with Mafi, who made the switch a year or two ago from defense to offense. So seeing that kind of paying off a little bit for Chip Kelly with some of the moves he's made in the past. Things are looking good. When you have the running game going and established and you're not trying to show everything that you have against Hawaii and you have LSU coming up, the pedal was off the gas, or your foot was off the gas a little bit if you're the Bruins and you're not showing everything you have. And why try and go crazy with the passing game and force mistakes and throw the ball when you don't need to, when you can just run it on the ground, play it safe, and give it to those guys that you trust.
Let's go to one last question before I let you go. And the headline game is a different game, but in my opinion, what could arguably be the best game of the weekend is LSU UCLA. So I'm going to start the sentence and I'll let you finish the sentence. UCLA will win because.
They'll win. They'll win because of the running game, but I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson is important, as I kind of alluded to earlier. I mean, again, he's a dual threat quarterback who can run the ball. So if that means he has to run the ball himself, that's fine. They do need to establish the passing game. The passing game will be important, but at the end of the day, you at least need to open the passing game enough so you can keep the LSU defense honest and get something going with Charbonnet and Brown in the backfield. I mean, those are your guys that obviously showed you they can score, and it doesn't matter how far you are or where you're at on the field, they're going to make a play for you. I think Britton Brown had a 21-yard run, and I think I think Charbonnet had a 47-yard touchdown run. So those guys can move the ball for you. There's no doubt about it. The defense, I think the defense may have some sort of an advantage against their quarterback. I think Max Johnson, I think the guy they wanted as a starter got hurt again this season. So I think Max Johnson is the guy for LSU. I think he played the end of last season, so he has some experience. So not discounting the experience he had, but I think if the Bruins can apply pressure on defense, rattle him a little bit, and it's been a tough week for LSU. One of the reporters said on Monday, just when we were kind of talking amongst ourselves, that it's almost like a no-win situation for LSU, for USC, or for UCLA anyways, that they either win and they come off as the upset story, but then they also beat LSU, who got relocated and moved to Houston, and they're playing with a different level of emotions because of everything going on with the hurricane, or LSU just runs over UCLA, and it was just like LSU was just a more talented team. So maybe it is a no-win situation for UCLA, but I think if they win the game, even if it's just by a point, it can only mean positive things for this group going forward. They have high expectations, and this is a big game. The first non-conference win in what is now Chip Kelly's fourth year, to barely get your first non-conference win last week. Say what you will about it, but I think they have a little bit of momentum going into this game, and again, this being their second of 3 home games to start the season. I think they're in a good place. Now, will the fans show up? That remains to be seen. That's a conversation that could take up a whole segment on its own. But did you get a chance to see the UCLA game and see that attendance? I'm curious what others outside of the state may have thought about that.
I'm actually in shock and awe, because maybe it was your stat that I read or somewhere that said lowest attendance like 1946.
That was me, yeah.
Something in that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also saw on a different report that pretty much any kid in high school with a high school ID gets a free ticket.
Yeah, if you're a Southern California high school student, they were offering up free tickets to you. The UCLA students aren't on campus yet, so some of them aren't in town yet. So some of that gets thrown around with why there's a low turnout. The numbers were trending down prior to the pandemic. So that 2019 season, they were just averaging low numbers as it was. And I mean, when the team is kind of, in a rebuild mode the way that it was, I mean, I guess that's understandable. But, this last Saturday was the first game back with fans, first game, you're still having to wear a mask. But UCLA is doing everything it can with giving out free tickets. And, they just started selling alcohol again. They're doing a lot of other cool things to make it more friendly and whatnot, and improve the game day experience. So we'll see how things go. It should be a fun one, regardless who's in the arena. I know I'll be in the stadium, and I'll have everything you need in terms of updates on that game.
Well, I will be on my couch, but I'm sure my Twitter feed will be open. James, always great stuff. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Charlie.